Welcome to our Sales Execution Forum, the new rules of thumb for building quality distribution. Just a little housekeeping, we are recording this webinar and you will be able to access it along with many other great resources on our GreatVines website. Please do feel free to ask questions by typing them in the panel on the right-hand side, and we will address them at the end of the discussion. Thank you, listeners, for taking time to join us. We are in good company with our knowledgeable panelists today, Ben Salisbury and Christian Ryss. I am Cara Pepper. I'm based in the Willamette Valley, just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I come out of the wine side of the business with almost 15 years of experience. Ben, hello. Could you kindly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. For the last 2.5 years, I've been operating my own consulting firm out of Dallas. We have a team of 7 people. Prior to that, I spent 17 years in the on-premise chain world, 5 with Constellation Brands. That was my last corporate job, and 12 with St. Michel Wine Estates. Altogether, 30 years in the wine business. And I work very closely with our technology partners, GreatVines, and also Equinox Technology Partners.
Very good. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us. Christian Ryss, would you like to also give a little background and make an introduction?
Happy to do that. I just want to thank you, Cara, and everybody at GreatVines for setting this up. I think this is a very exciting adventure that we're on here, given the topic. Equinox is a management and technology consulting firm. We are exclusively focused on the alcohol beverage market, and we improve trade sales performance for our clients by using enabling technologies, various data sources, and best practices. This is all based on my previous background of about 25 years on the business side of technology, where we used various technologies to improve business performance for our clients so that they could themselves get more leverage in their markets.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, I think we should jump right in. If we are going to talk about new rules of thumb, I thought a good place to start would be on how things have changed. So our first topic is, what has changed? Is it a new marketplace? How does this affect how to be successful in the new reality? Christian, would you like to take the first swipe at this?
Sure. Well, I think as we're all aware, of the changes in the distribution space, the consolidation of distributors, I think has gotten us to a tipping point in our new reality here, where today, compared to 20 years ago, we have 5 times as many producers out there and 75% fewer distributors to move that product through. It's pretty well known that there are about 20 distributors out there that control 60% of the market. And so what this really means is we're at a point where producers of any size can no longer do business as usual. And that doing things a bit differently can actually make a big difference in the success formula for you in the market.
Yeah, that's very, very, very good points. Ben, do you want to kind of add some color in there, or?
Sure. You know, for people who have been in the business for some time, if we're going to talk about new rules, it's helpful to talk about the old rules. You know, it used to be you worked really hard to have a strong relationship with your distributor partners. You'd spend time and money educating them on your products. You'd take them to the wine country when you could. You created incentives. You'd get in the car and work with them as often as possible. And many of those rules still apply. The problem is they're no longer enough, not nearly enough.
Right.
And for a lot of people that have been in the business a long time, they just don't realize how many more people are out there trying to sell wine through fewer distributors. And so the part of the new reality is you're going to have to learn how to rely less and less on your distributor. This is a tough topic because the distributors aren't going to say this, and most suppliers are afraid to say it because they don't want to upset distributors, but it's a fact. Distributors are very overwhelmed. They have hundreds and hundreds of wineries that they're trying to represent, and this isn't a problem just for the small to mid-size wine companies. It's a problem for the big ones too. I can tell you, after 5 years with Constellation, it was just as frustrating trying to get things done through the distributor as it is for small firm. But it's especially important for small to medium size. And we're going to talk a little bit more here today about what that do-it-yourself piece looks like. But the fact remains, distributors are overwhelmed, trying to serve too many masters. They're very, very good at what they do. You're always going to need them, but you have to do more of it yourself, and you have to help them help you. Because I would say one of the new rules is the best you're going to get is to expect the distributor to match your efforts. So if you don't show up in the market, you can't really expect them to show up.
Right, right, and that's a very fair thing. I think that's a fair thing to say. I want to also call out that this isn't just challenges for wineries, right? This is challenges for craft spirit companies or large spirit companies or in the folks in the beer space as well. And it's not just competition in your segment anymore, right? It's all of those craft products are actually competing with each other, where in the past it wasn't, you really focused on your category. And I think that's a big change we've seen too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add too that this is really a great opportunity. While all of this change is underway, really the change agents and the organizations, the producers that are going to have the most success going forward are those that are going to take on this new challenge and do things in a different way. They will themselves, by virtue of their actions, differentiate themselves in a way that will make them far more successful compared to the likely many that will be doing things as usual.
Definitely. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to start. Let's dig a little deeper. What do suppliers need to do differently to achieve quality distribution? So let's actually dig in and talk about where we should make some changes, right? Ben, do you want to start with this topic?
Sure. I have three things that I would mention here at this point about, specifically what would you start to do differently. The very first thing would be, what it is you measure. The old measurement of accounts sold is just not nearly enough. We have to dive deeper into the data to look at the quality of the distribution. Do you have the right wines in the right places? Right? Take advantage of the volume opportunities that are available. The velocity, measuring the velocity, how much product is being sold through each point of distribution. Sales per point of distribution, also known as velocity, is an important measurement. So I would just caution anyone who's sticking with the basic measurements of accounts sold and depletions, that's a great place to start looking at some of these new metrics. Another thing is to narrow the focus of your own sales efforts. If you have a sales team around the country, if you have people embedded in certain markets, you can't afford to just get in the car and go randomly from account to account with distributors. The fact is, not all accounts are equal. They're not even close to being equal. It's an absolute rule of thumb that 20% of the volume is being done by 80% of the volume is being done by 20% of the account.
Yep.
The tools exist today to identify that 20%. That is one of the big wins. And as Christian was saying about being, a change agent and taking on transformative behavior, that's absolutely one of the things you need to be doing differently. Make room on your plate for some business intelligence where you can identify the most attractive accounts. Fish where the fish are.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I think that's really important, that's a different way to achieve quality distribution, and this one is really, I don't want to say controversial, but it's really hard for people to get their heads around, and that is the sales approach. The way that you approach that sales interaction with a customer. The days of just putting wines in a sample bag and showing up at the account and pitching those products, this is just not an effective way to grow distribution. And it sounds, counterintuitive because that's how it's been done for so many years, but it's really not the way to do it. You've got to be more prescriptive. You've got to be more, do a lot more research about not only which accounts to call on, but you have to do your homework. You have to be patient and build rapport first to get to know that account's business needs and try to figure out how you could help them. It isn't about what you have in your bag that day to sell. That transactional way of selling is dying the slow death that it should. So there's a lot more to that whole sales approach thing. You could probably do a whole nother webinar on the sales approach, but just opening your mind to the fact that that has to change if you want to be successful in the new reality.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying about having competition across different segments. These buyers are bombarded from each different segment of beverage, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up. Christian, did you want to? I apologize. Ben, were you done? Did you want to have any other comments?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Christian, did you want to comment on this piece?
Yeah, I just want to add on here that as Ben mentioned, it's vital to do your homework on making these calls. And one thing that's very true is that we are bombarded with information, all of us, right? Various forms of social media, email, and so on and so forth. And the buyers themselves are really well informed. So a product presentation only approach is really not going to address the change in the dynamic of the way you need to sell when it comes to dealing with retail accounts. And part of the solution has to be organizing information that's really unique to your brand and to your business and meaningful to you. Everybody has a different approach to moving their products into market, and you need to be able to, in addition to the traditional strategy, augment that strategy with a profile of information about those accounts. And we all can get access to shipment information and depletion information, but that's kind of looking in the rearview mirror. What we really need to spend more time on is anticipating and understanding more about those accounts before we go into them. And when you're in those accounts, actually gathering profiles of those accounts or information and storing that information in a database where you can, at a later point, go back and evaluate the entire spectrum of your sales activities and the sales activities in those accounts, so that when you go back to market, you are operating using a proactive plan based on the information that you gathered. And married with a different approach to selling into accounts, you'll be able to focus the activities of your salespeople on the right accounts, the 20% that Ben mentioned that will generate the 80%. You'll be able to get answers to tough questions, right, with one version of the truth in one place that everybody has access to.
I like that. We talk a lot about that, right? The leading versus lagging indicators, and we do a really good job in this industry tracking our depletions, tracking our shipments, which are all, as you pointed out, lagging indicators. And I think you're right. Looking at what are those leading indicators? What are those selling activities in the market that you're doing? Is it when you do a staff training? Is it when you have a piece of POS? Is it when those custom pieces that help that business sell more, right? Whether it's on or off premise, those are really important pieces of the puzzle. I think that in there, you have to pay attention to those these days, right? I'll point out the little quote we have on here. I think it's a good one. Dina Opici, right? She's a leader, one of a great distributor in our country. There's a very clear line between when someone's looking to make a sale to us and somebody's looking to be our partner. Our salespeople identify brands with a person, and if that person shows that they're supporting our efforts, we'll do anything for them. There's this shift, right, where we used to think that's the distributor's job, and now we need to own that and be part of that with them.
Yeah, I would just add, Cara, it is shocking how many wine companies believe that once you find a good distributor, you're good,
You're done,
they'll build your distribution for you, and it's not an exaggeration to say that there's still hundreds of people who view the world that way, and they're in for a rude awakening.
Right, that's when the work's supposed to start, right, not end.
Yeah, it's a partnership, and you have to do your part.
Definitely. Okay, our next little topic here. What are the critical success factors to make changes in your organization? So we've talked a little bit, right, about some of those changes, that shift of mind. How can we actually make those changes? Christian, would you lead us off on this one, please?
Yeah, this is a topic near and dear to me. After decades in the IT industry, I've seen the pattern over and over again, and I think we've all had some experience with it. And to ultimately really understand and recognize that tools of any sort, especially technology, are really just the enablers, right? And the change is hard enough as it is. And what we're really talking about here in terms of addressing the market in a different way is actually changing the culture of the way you work. And it's very easy to look at the technology and go, wow, we've implemented this really cool technology, our problems are over. In reality, you need to think of technology as just a tool, and that the focus needs to be really on the culture that you are evolving and how you're going to evolve that culture. It's very attractive to build a beautiful solution or a new strategy and roll it out and believe that's going to happen. We're huge advocates, especially when it comes to combining technology with process change, on what we call the crawl, walk, run approach, right? Take a measured approach. As Ben likes to say, get rich slow, right? So be measured in the way that you roll out change, technology and process-wise, because you've got to consider the degree of adoption that will take place, especially in a community of folks that have perhaps been doing things for the same way for 20 years. So that's a set of critical success factors. But what goes along with that really is the management focus that needs to be in play here, the sponsorship for making that kind of change, so that as you establish a discipline of focus and a new approach to, say, proactive planning in the market, that it's pretty well understood across the organization that this is a shift that everybody is going to be a part of.
Yeah, I've seen that multiple times, where you have a really strong leader that has a really great vision, and the whole organization has made that shift, right, and is using GreatVines as a tool, right, and they're really tracking their leading indicators and they're targeting accounts, and then you have a personnel change, right? That manager leaves and you sort of lose your sponsor. I think that's a really important piece, what you're saying about it needs to be a whole organization shift. And you have to have one person leading it, but you can't just have one person buying into it. It really has to be the whole organization, or else you end up going backwards, right? You lose that momentum, and it can be frustrating for the team itself, right? You kind of lose that management vision. That's a good point.
Yep, crawl, walk, run.
Yes, crawl, walk, run. Ben, Christian said that you say this often. What is this get rich slow? What is that?
Well,
share about that.
there's a couple of things involved there. There's such urgency in our industry, right? There's, especially on the wine side, where all of this wine has to be sold before the new vintage is bottled, and it just creates this urgency. It's so hyper-competitive, that creates a lot of urgency too. Most people don't realize that of all consumer product categories out there, the wine business is the most complex, the most competitive. But having the discipline to work smarter, not harder, is difficult. And it is, like Christian said, it's a cultural shift. So doing a lot of little things really well over time is how you build a great distribution. There is no magic pill. There is no incentive that you can write that's going to give you lots of quality distribution fast. In fact, I recently wrote a blog post called "Why Distributors or Why Sales Incentives Don't Work," and I got into this quite a bit because there is no magic program. There's no product launch. There's no trip incentive that's going to do it. It's every day blocking and tackling, taking care of all the little things first. So patience is a huge part of success in the new reality.
Mm-hmm. I like it. This is a great quote. It's been around for a little while. The price of light is less than the cost of darkness, right? That a lot of times organizations are resistant to pay for a technology tool, right, that will give you more kind of visibility into your organization and into what your team is doing. But it's sort of saying, that cost for buying a technology tool, or it could be applied to a different case, but in this case, right, is less than the cost of darkness, right? It's less than not knowing what's going on and not managing your business.
And I don't. If we're
Good.
still on this particular topic, just a couple of things to add. There's a natural resistance to change, right? And change is really tough, especially in an industry that's steeped in tradition like ours. But when it comes to managing differently and looking at this world differently, it isn't always about leveraging technology. Isn't always about accountability. There's a lot of resistance to adoption of these tools by salespeople because they feel like Big Brother is watching, or I don't need to be micromanaged, this sort of thing. Part of what we have to do as leaders is to change that thinking from one of accountability to one of ROI and effectiveness. It's expensive to have a sales team. Travel and car allowances and all these things cost money, and we need a return on that investment. So focus on return on investment and effectiveness is a better way than to just feel like people need to be held accountable. And another thing that I would say about this change under the topic of changes is it used to be that the more knowledgeable you were about your products, the more successful you would be. Now, product knowledge is very important. It's mission critical. But there's something new that needs to be added to that, and that is business acumen and understanding how your buyers make money and how they make a profit and what are some of the challenges they're up against. And for example, in the restaurant world, all restaurants everywhere, whether they're a chain or an independent, they all want the same three things. They want to grow revenue, they want to cut their costs, and they want to improve guest satisfaction. To the degree that you and your salespeople know how to do that, those will take you much farther than your wine knowledge or your spirits knowledge. So it's the kind of change it's just an example of the kind of change we're talking about.
That's a good.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's a good point, Ben. I mean, it really changes. We have to, in using these tools, it's not about applying the same old ways of doing things, right? It's not about the volume of call activity, as an example, right? It's about the quality of that activity. And as you begin to roll out some of these new practices, you have to adjust to a different set of quality metrics. This gets to focusing on those things that actually drive your business and measuring those against the results, and then making some determination about what's really working, and what's not. And it might vary by retail account, it might vary by market, but with a comprehensive view of all of your information and data in one place, you have the means to be able to make those assessments and plan accordingly.
Very good. Just a reminder that you can type in questions on the right-hand side. We will be addressing a few of those in just a moment. This is our last and final slide. And Ben, you had mentioned how you're a blogger. You have some great blog posts that you've been putting up there. And you recently, this is actually where the topic from today came from, but you recently had one about new rules of thumb. And would you share your thoughts and share this with us?
Yes, and I would welcome you to go read this blog post if you haven't, and share it with other people. That would be great. It's already been read and shared by a great number of people, but these are the 4 takeaways if you don't have time to read it. The new rules of thumb that I was suggesting were, number 1, if it's important to you, you're going to need to do it yourself. For example, if you have high image, high tier wines that you would like to see in high tier, high image restaurants, you're probably going to have to do most of that yourself. The best you can do is get the distributor to match your efforts. So getting used to that as a new rule of thumb is critical. Another one is this concept of help your distributors help you. When I launched this blog post, most of the great comments I got back were from distributors, because they're not really allowed to come out and say this, or it would be awkward for them to come say it. But they're only going to match your efforts. If you don't show up in the market, they're not going to show up. And part of what showing up means is have a realistic plan, have some a real strategy that's realistic and accessible, and understanding the realities of the marketplace. You can't just leave it up to the distributors. But I've written more about what this looks like to help your distributors help you. But it's definitely one of the new rules of thumb. They want to do a good job. And one of the things I mentioned in there is that nowadays the quality of the people working at distributors is better than ever. The access to data that distributors have is way better than ever. Their use of technology is incredible, but they can only do so much. You're going to have to do a lot more and more of this yourself. I'm not saying you don't need them. Absolutely not. You're always going to need them, but just start participating more. The third thing is, and I love this topic, I'd love to talk more, the more you act like a salesperson, the less you're going to sell. Today's buyers, like Christian said, are far more informed than ever before, and they're also time pressed. So sitting there spouting the features and benefits of your product is pretty useless, and there are better ways to make an impact on your placements, and a lot of that comes back to that business acumen. For example, helping a restaurant understand how many wines is too many wines, talking to them about the cash on hand tied up in their inventory and how often they turn it, helping them with some pricing models to make sure that there's a good pricing strategy across the wines by the bottle, wines by the glass. These are skills that would be far more, received far better than just you talking about your Chardonnay. Because to be honest with you, there's not a lot of differentiation between what you're presenting and what the person's coming in behind you will present. And this last thing is leverage technology, which we didn't really get into too much today, but this is, as Christian said, this is the difference maker. This is the holy grail. This is what will separate the really great and successful beverage companies moving forward from the others. Is technology scary? Yes. Is it complex? Yes. Is it expensive? Yes. But it's not nearly as expensive as sticking with, the old ways of doing things. And I can't think of no better place to start than to talking to the people at GreatVines about how other people are using this technology already and how it is changing their business, starting with the quality of their distribution.
Well, thank you for that plug. Any more comments on that piece, Ben? We do have a couple questions that came in if you guys want me to jump to those.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's fine.
Okay.
Let me just add, I just want to add one point about the technology end of things, given that's my bias. I just want to say that, even though our industry is slow in adopting technology compared to others, right? Some of the things that we're talking about here have been worked out in a lot of industries, many years ago. The good news is that you didn't have to be the guinea pig. So when you launch into new technologies, you're dealing with platforms and environments that have been pretty well tested, and there are a lot of really good best practices out there in how to use and operate this new tool that have been honed and very well developed. So yes, it's a little bit scary. It seems daunting, but there are folks out there that can give you a hand with that, and that's what GreatVines is about, and that's what we're here to provide support for.
Very good. Okay, a question that came in, and I think this sort of refers to, you guys just briefly touched on it in the beginning. How do you put together target lists? I'm assuming this is coming from a supplier standpoint.
Yeah, well, we knew we were going to get this question in our preparation. We always do. It's pretty amazing how much data is out there on accounts, how many seats they have, whether or not they have private dining space, how full are they, when is their rush hour. It is amazing what is available if you know what to look for. And I have spent literally over the last 10 years, I've spent perfecting these techniques. In the absence of real data, wouldn't it be great if you just had a list of all the restaurants in America and how much wine they buy? By varietal, by price tier, that would be great. But that doesn't exist. But it doesn't stop us from researching where is most of the volume being done. So knowing what attributes to look for, depending on what your goals are. So if your goal is high image wines and high image restaurants, it isn't just about tearing a page out of Zagat anymore. It's about understanding the wines that you're trying to sell will fit in these types of restaurants, and we search for those attributes. So if you're selling a high-end Pinot Noir, you may not be as interested in steakhouses and seafood restaurants as others, but you'd be interested in something very, very specific. You'd want to know that restaurant really loves Pinot Noir and has strong knowledge of Burgundy. And those are the kind of things that we can look for, qualitative things. And on the volume side, there's a perfect correlation between foot traffic and volume. And so when we do our research, that's what we're researching for, is does this account, whether on or off, do a lot of volume, do a lot of people shop there and eat there. So there's more to it, but that kind of gives you an idea. We live in a wonderful age where we can find anything that you want to find if you're willing to spend the time and you know to look for it. And that's one of the things that we do at Salisbury Creative Group. We have a team of people that do spend all day, every day researching accounts based on a set of criteria that gets us to the business objective.
And
is
I
that,
think,
oh,
oh,
sorry, Christian,
sorry.
really quickly, is that something that only large suppliers can afford to, for you guys to do for them?
No, not at all. In fact, the cost of doing it is pretty reasonable. And Christian and I have advised many people to start small. Start in one market with one person, and test the proof of concept. If there's 3,000 restaurants in Boston, you could try to cut that list down or take a page out of Zagat. But if you would spend a little bit of money and let us do the search, we will give you a list of the 50 most attractive. Now, 50, your average salesperson on the street can handle 50. And your chances of success, the probability of success, goes up dramatically when you've done this focus ahead of time. So no, it's not just for big companies. In fact, the smaller you are, the more accessible this is. Because a lot of the big companies, they try to use their muscle in the market and their strength in the market. And it's smarter to use a rifle than a shotgun when it comes to stuff like this.
That's great. Christian, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just in preparing for getting at the right accounts, part of the practice has to be evaluating your own strategy for your products, right? Your own sales strategy, and really understanding more about where the fit is for your product in what kind of account. So drafting up, scenarios or profiles, of those accounts, right? And that begins the process of actually defining, what kind of information you want to gather. So as part of your exercise, if you're uncertain about why your products are selling, right, because you're very reliant or dependent on the distributors, going out and touching the accounts more regularly and gathering up the information to try and assess, what product fits best with what account, and then putting that into some form of a database enables you to begin the process. And this is a learning process, right? So you start out in one place, you go, well, this is what we believe to be true. You can test that. You've got a way to evaluate that against data in your database, and then continue to measure success against those various profiles. And that begins the process really of working with someone like Ben to say, okay, here's what we think is pretty true for our space and for our products. Now let's go out and find some of those very selective accounts where there's a fit.
We have a follow-up question to this also. It says, I need client and contact lists, and should I expect my distributor to give these to me as a supplier?
I guess it depends who you want to be in charge.
This comes under the get rich slow thing, right? I mean, if I was leading a sales team, I would want my salespeople to do the work of discovering that information for myself, because in the process of trying to discover it, you will learn a lot about the accounts, you'll learn a lot about the buyer. I would say the short answer is no. I would be embarrassed to ask a distributor just to hand that stuff over to me.
I'm not even sure you'd want the list, right? I mean, what lists are they going to give you?
Yeah, and just because you have it doesn't mean anything. You still have to go research the buyer, his attitudes, his influences, their background, etc. That is where the magic happens in sales. That's how you move from a transactional sale to, being consultative, because you're doing the research. And if you're using a CRM tool, every piece of research you do on the account and the contact you can record, including following them on social media. So there's so much you can learn. And if LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, most everyone is only 1 or 2 steps away from the buyer at Vino Volo or the Marriott purchasing guy. It's most people just don't. There's an old saying that opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. But it's that work. It's that work is where the magic happens, and that's where you'll outperform your competitors.
I think a piece of that, though, that you should be, communicating, and it comes from your distributor, right, is sort of the other side of it, right, is making sure that you know who your top accounts are, making sure that you know who the contact is there and that you're thanking them. And if you aren't purchasing depletion data, you may need to ask your distributor for that type of information. But you should know who those buyers are and who are those sales reps at that distributor that are really, doing the work, and then figure out how you can support them. I think that's an appropriate thing to ask and fair to ask too. Okay, we do have another question, and we want to wrap it up pretty quick here. What are the telltale signs of poor quality distribution, right? We talked about, quality distribution. So what are the signs of that you don't have quality distribution, really?
Kristen, you want to take that?
I'll let you handle it, Ben.
Okay, well, this is going to sound like a shameless plug for GreatVines, but if you have a tool like GreatVines that marries your CRM capabilities with your RAD data, you can run, in a matter of seconds, you can run reports that show you how often a customer has bought. Did they buy once and never buy again? This kind of information is critical. So some of the telltale signs of quality distribution is that they place it one time and never reorder it. Mm-hmm. Also looking at the velocity. There are some by the glass placements that can yield 10 to 20 cases a month. I would much rather have one of those than have them buy 2 cases and pour it off by the glass. So looking at, do you have the right wines in the right places? Is the velocity where you want it to be on a per placement basis? Are you fishing where the fish are? It costs just as much money to make a placement at a low velocity account as it does a high velocity account. So why would you not pursue the other? And one of the big mistakes is I can tell by looking at a customer's data if they're relying too much on the distributor, because the distributor's job is not to build quality distribution necessarily. It's to ship an invoice for your product. So there's a strategy that has to do with having wide and thin distribution. You want lots of accounts using your product, not just 1 or 2 that are using it all. There are a lot of people that rely on Costco in the market, and then the distributor will, unless you point it out, they're like, look, we're selling 40% more wine than we did last month. Well, yeah, but 85% of that went to Costco. So you have to make it your own. Right? Yeah, you have to make it your own business to look at the quality of distribution. Where are you being sold? How many accounts? What's the velocity of those accounts? How many one and done accounts do we have? I really hate to see suppliers run a distribution incentive where you make a 6-bottle placement of a wine, or you make a 2-bottle placement or a back bar placement, and then you pay a salesperson for that. This is one of the worst ways to build quality distribution because none of it sticks. But to measure stickiness, you need a tool. You need technology tools.
Yep. Well, very good. We had some good. We dove right in deep on some good topics today. I thank both of you for joining us, and here's our contact information if anyone wants to follow up with any other questions.